Hello, this is Will Faerber from Art to Ride, and today we're looking at a third submission by Joe of her horse Chaplin. And since the last video that we saw of the horse, he is looking so much better. His walk is already more active. If you go back and compare this video with his previous video, what you'll see is he's stepping much bigger behind, hardly ever losing the back end. This is a beautiful leg yield, just absolutely perfect, just the way it should be. Shoulders slightly in advance, and you see how there was a stretching into the contact in the exercise. So that was really, really good. So glad you added that in there. But if you take a look at this horse, he's already, you can see a little bit of dip there behind the saddle, and that's going to all improve. But if you go back and look at your previous submission, that's already improved a great deal. And the activity of the horse's walk in the last video that I saw of the horse, I got the sense that his back end was just kind of falling out quite often, even though you were on the right track. But now it's so much better. He's much more clearly stepping forward and through. There isn't this sense of kind of one step forward, two step back. Now it has a sense of all moving forward, the nice big swinging steps in the walk and in the trot and canter. So much improved, and I'm already seeing a lot more lift off the ground, in the trot work and in the canter as well. So the horse is definitely working over his back. You say in your letter that your vets and chiropractors have been very impressed with how much you've done, and I am saying they well should be. If you can continue on the track that you're on now, that back is going to come completely up flat in another couple of months. So that's really, really good work. As I said, just so much more active, the sense of the horse going someplace. Really good in your lateral work here. Just about right. Shoulders slightly in advance of the hindquarters, but yet swinging actively and stepping through. So again, if you go back and look at your previous video, there was a little bit of a sense of that, feeling the horse's hind legs are stuck in mud a little bit and not always coming and stepping through with, with the same regularity. And now the walk has gotten so much more swinging and active. So this is really, really, really good work. And fulfilling all of my requirements, to be worked without lunging, is that you're coming right on the walk and being able to stretch the horse and getting the first gait in position before you move on, which is what we must always do. Riders who ignore the walk, or who use it nothing but, for something to just walk around, and they think they're letting the horse relax, but they're not getting the horse through the back. But now that you are and really getting the horse to swing, and look how beautifully, and this is a great skill to learn if you ever have to rehab a horse, because if you can work them over the back in the walk, you can build muscle even in the walk, so you can do a lot of work if you ever have a horse that's injured for one reason or another, maybe a foot injury or shoe injury where they can't go into a trot. You can really do a lot of great work for them if you can keep working like this in the walk. So really great work, beautiful rhythm, say much more active and swinging, much steadier. It all just looks much, much better, and basically pretty consistently over his back. You're doing a wonderful job of riding him and never seeing anything but quiet hands and quiet legs. Just what I want to see. Beautiful right there, reaching over. And once again, see how you're getting the right effect in your lateral work, because the horse is getting rounder through the lateral work as opposed to hollow. Very often we see people trying to do shoulder ins or leg yields, and really all they're getting is kind of the neck bent to one side. And that's another point, how beautifully you're doing here. The neck must never be bent more than the middle of the horse's back, and that's just what you're doing. The neck is out long and reaching forward. It isn't overly bent to one side while you're doing the lateral work. So you're getting real bend, that is bend in the middle of the horse's body. And even though this horse's back has a long way, or a bit more of a ways to come up, you're already getting to come through, and already the effect of what you're seeing is absolutely wonderful. So great job. It's again good shoulder four here. Really good rhythm. Remember, the rhythm is the hallmark of great dressage, rhythm and relaxation. So when you see those things coupled together, it's usually good riding. And that's what I'm seeing here. Very, very nice. Once again, as I said, these steps are so much bigger than they were in your previous videos. I'm never getting the sense hardly here that his back end is falling out. And what you'll also notice is the horse already looks more uphill. Remember, when a horse is developing, which is why it's so important that they stretch in these beginning years, is that the withers really has to pull up through the shoulders, and that's what happens over time. And that's what gives the horse the appearance of being more uphill, and then allows the hindquarters to come even deeper, into true collection. So if horses never get this kind of work and never get developed correctly, You know, and especially in horses that are, you know, raised as young horses in small pens, which is what we see here, you know, where I am in California quite a lot. You know, people, no one has a lot of land here. So, you know, people buy babies and put them in these little pens in their backyard, and then they wonder why they fall apart when they're 3 or 4 years old and they try to train them. So it's so important that horses get this stretching down, and that's what it's all about. You know, when horses are out in pasture and live in pasture where they're grazing continuously with their necks down, they get a lot of that development all on their own. But as I said, you know, that's a luxury a lot of people don't have in a lot of different places where land is either too hard and rocky like it is here in California, or simply people can't afford it, you know. So this work is so important. And already we see with this horse how much more swinging he is, how that hole behind your saddle is already filling up wonderfully. You know, and even when you get a little bit of resistance there, he comes right back into it. You did just the right thing. You got him through from your inside leg into that outside rein, and he came right away round again. Very, very nice. So when we get to the trot work, what you'll see is I'm already seeing a lot more lift off the ground. In your last video, you know, he was clearly on the forehand in the stretch. Now he's in the stretch and the forehand is beginning to come up. So I'm seeing that change already happen. And once again, remember that that has nothing to do, that change that is getting them over their back and getting them uphill has nothing to do with the position of the neck. It's just the opposite of what people think. Because when you pull a neck up high, thinking you're getting the horse off the forehand and the horse doesn't have enough strength, it drops its back and will always be on the forehand. Once again, it doesn't matter how high a horse lifts its legs. It's whether it engages from behind and lifts its back. So like when you see a saddlebred, they're completely on the forehand even though they raise their knees so high up in the air. So raising the legs has nothing to do with whether a horse is on the forehand or not. It's whether it lifts its back, and that allows the horse to come deeper under the body and then thrust itself more off the ground, which is what we're already seeing here, this horse, when we get to the trot work, as well as you can even see it in the walk. But already his withers has changed a bit and he has a more uphill appearance. And he doesn't just seem to be, you know, so downhill. So it changes all by itself, and that's the beauty of this system. Is, you know, and why so many people are frustrated trying, you know, this sort of uneducated manner of pulling the horse's head up in the air and thinking it's not on the forehand, because they'll never develop that way. Yes, you can get them to lift their legs up higher, just like a saddlebred or Tennessee Walker, but that has nothing to do, once again, as whether they're on the forehand or not. So a good shoulder in here, once again, good rhythm. And once again, look how beautifully he's moving and bending off your inside leg and moving right into that outside rein and standing up to it. That's what we're looking for. Really, really nice work. So you're getting a great job done in all these exercises. Good work there. Once again, just bringing him out from the rail and then leg yielding back. So there's lots of different ways we can do those leg yields. You can leg yield out away from the rail, or we can leg yield to the rail, or we can do a counter change of hand in the leg yield, which means we leg yield away from the rail, then change the bend and leg yield back. Just like a counter change of hand in the half pass would be half passing to one side and then changing the bend and half passing into the bend. But remember, of course, the half pass differs from the shoulder in or leg yield in that we're moving then into the direction of the bend, which requires a little more development in the part of the horse. But I think for what you're doing here, you could certainly be ready to start a little half pass. So in your next video, I wouldn't mind seeing a little bit of half pass in the walk. And once again, you can do the half pass with the horse completely in the stretched if you can. So as much as possible. The horse doesn't have to be up in a higher level frame to do a half pass or to begin to move into the direction of the bend. It does not. You can do that exercise wherever the horse is comfortable and can maintain the position of the back, that being our criteria for everything that we do. You know, if we lose the back, we have to go back and get it again. So if we try a new exercise, we try new things, but if the horse tends to fall apart and we lose the rhythm or it drops its back, then we just simply have to back up a step, reestablish that, and try again. So in your next video, let's begin to try a little half pass. I like to start the half pass from the corner. Now, a lot of people like to do the haunches in first. Now, I personally don't. I don't do a whole lot of haunches in with horses because they tend to be kind of crooked that way anyway. I find the half pass to be a more useful exercise with most horses. And in some ways, it's kind of easier than a haunches in the sense that, like the leg yield, it's easier to keep the shoulder over and keep the horse swinging through. That is, the shoulder slightly in advance, which the horse must be, just like in the leg yield. In the half pass, the horse's shoulder must be slightly in advance of the hindquarters, otherwise the horse will hit its legs together. So think about that as you begin working in half pass in your next video. starting, of course, in the walk. Get it just like we do everything else. It gets done in the walk first, and when you can get it in the walk, then you can begin to apply it in the trot. So once again, now that we are in a trot, however, we can see how much more swinging and active this trot is than it was the last time, and I'm actually beginning to see a little thrust off the ground behind. So this horse is developing absolutely beautifully. As I said, he's beginning to get his springs on, as I like to say, and that's what we must get. So that's the most important thing. Once again, the back guides everything we do in training. As I can see, it has started to guide your work, and how beautifully and rhythmic you're keeping all this work. You're never getting him into a frame. You know, he gets a little hollow once in a while, but you're able to put him right back in it again and reestablish that forward swing. So really good. Once again, leg yield here. This is excellent. Shoulder slightly in advance, no loss of rhythm, and he's actually stretching over his back even more in the exercise, and that's what we're looking for. And once again, if you go back and compare this video with your previous video, you can really see that he's starting to develop some springs now. And once again, even though he's stretching all the way down, look at the difference in his posture. That is, he looks more uphill in this video than he did in his previous video, which tells me he's getting deeper and he's starting to thrust and lift the forehand off the ground a little bit to that strength. And once again, remember, the head and neck position has nothing to do with that. In fact, it facilitates to have the head and neck position longer and lower to get that to happen than it does to bring the neck up in the air, as so many people think it does. So once again, another great leg yield here. Very good. I love how you're just swinging and active in this rhythm. It's always the same. It's absolutely beautiful, just like that. So we want to spend as very little time as we can doing bad steps. The problem with so many people's riding today is, well, the whole ride is upside down, but then they're working on, exercises. You can't take individual exercises away from the back. Once again, that's being the point. If you lose the back, the exercise will have no effect whatsoever. In fact, it will damage the horse's legs. All of the exercises of dressage are great for horses, shoulder ins, leg yields, all these things that we do, but they're only good for them if the back is up so the horse can swing through. All of these same exercises with a hollow back can really damage a horse's legs, so that's what you must be careful of. Once again, it's why we're seeing, vets are getting rich these days off of, injecting all these horses' joints and things, but none of them would need it if people would work their horses like this. A horse should be getting injected maybe at 20 years old, but if you're injecting your 5 and 6 years old, there's something wrong with what you're doing. And that's usually what it is. You're not working the horse through the back, so the joints are all wearing out. And that's what happens, just like a car. If a car has no suspension, every joint in the car, every nut and bolt is going to rattle loose. Well, that's exactly what happens to horses. If they're not working through their back, they may do some spectacular looking movements to people who don't know what they're looking at. Once again, like a saddlebred or Tennessee Walker, looks very impressive to people who know nothing about horses, because people are immediately taken, to the eye of the horse. People don't look at the legs. That the legs are all kind of a big blur to people till they learn how to see. So it's very important that we learn how to see in riding. That we learn to look at the right parts of the horses and not just the head and neck to decide whether a horse is going correctly or not, or whether it's beautiful. We want to look at everything, start at the back and go forward, just like in riding. When I analyze a horse's gaits, I start at the back, not at the front. Once again, really good swing in this trot. Everything about this ride has just been exemplary. There's been almost no changes in the rhythm. Good shoulder in down that long side. He veered on and off a little bit. You did exactly the right thing to correct him. You just put him right back in it. No loss of rhythm. Nothing was so extreme that you had to lose the rhythm. When we see riders who are constantly stopping up horses, stopping, starting, stopping, reining back, those are people who think all this rein back and things like this are going to put the horse on the hindquarters. It does not. All it does is slow the horse down. The only thing that puts a horse on its hindquarters is getting the horse working up through the back. That's what allows the hindquarters to come through. So anything you do without that prerequisite is simply, as I said, going to be harmful to the horse's legs and probably to his mental attitude. I mean, we see how beautifully this horse now goes and just comes out and swings actively. And right there, like for instance, you had a little difficulty, but you hardly lost the rhythm. You stretched right back. You got him right back in it without any loss of rhythm. And away you went. That's exactly what we're looking for. So if we don't ask anything too extreme, in other words, if you were to suddenly try to do a half pass with this horse, you'd probably run into some difficulties. But if you keep working the way you're doing and dovetailing one exercise into the other, that's the beauty of dressage exercises. Once you understand the hierarchy, that is the order in which they must come, and that we have to teach them to the horse in the different gaits, always starting with the walk. It starts in the walk, and you know, as I said, you might be doing walk trot and, sorry, you might be doing shoulder ins and leg yields and half pass in the walk, which is what you should start doing, the half passes in the walk. And then once you can get them in the walk, then you can add them to the trot. And when you can get them in the trot, you can add them to the canter. But this is just right, and most of your work is trot work, and that's exactly how it should be. Remember that trotting basically builds muscle. Wind generally builds wind. So, you know, if you have a horse that you can get over the back and, you know, is a kind of a sluggish kind of horse, yes, you can do more canter with it. But if you can't get it over its back, all you're going to do is build up a bunch of sort of aerobic exercise or aerobic fitness, that is wind, but without the muscles being right. And once again, that will damage the horse. I mean, you can only imagine that, you know, if you were, for instance, galloping a horse, and by the way, this canter looks really good, that was hollow, you can just imagine the damage that that does to the legs. As the faster you go, the more the pressure is increased on the horse's legs. At a full gallop, it's something like 5,000 pounds per square inch on the horse's feet. So, you know, if you don't have that back absorbing all that shock of movement, you can just imagine the damage that it does to horses. So this is really good canter, and once again, he's cantering well enough over his back that this is good. So once again, if you find that you have a bad canter, if you did find you had a bad canter, what you'd want to do is more trot work, as long as you can get the horse over the back, and then only check the canter every now and then. But that's about the right length of canter that you'd like to canter with this horse. You know, a few circles around, get him working over his back, come back to the trot and stretch again. And once again, your thrust and rhythm and everything, and once again, really get the forward sense that this horse is swinging forward and active. And remember, forward means to engage forward under the body. It doesn't mean to run straight ahead, the way so many people think it is, who have misinterpreted the concept of forward. It's only forward if the horse is coming forward from behind. So think of it that way. And once again, your canter here, this is well enough over his back. This is really good. And just about the frame he would be in. And you could just see, you know, he's doing really nicely over in the back here. If you were to bring his head up higher, what you'd find is the canter would, his back would drop, you know, and you might be able to get him into something that somebody who didn't know what they were looking at would think, you know, was a fancier canter with his head up in the air, but what would happen is his back would drop. Remember, you don't want a horse to feel like a rocking horse. I've recently heard a well-known clinician on YouTube here talking about, actually had people sitting in a little rocking chair and telling them that this is what a horse's back should feel like. And nothing could be further than the truth. A horse's back should lift you and stabilize, not rock back and forth while you're on it. So if you have the sense that you're sitting on a rocking chair, that the back end is going up and down, you know, the way a rocking horse does, that's a totally incorrect feel. That's not at all what you want. That's a horse that's simply shifting from its front end, back end, and lumbering along in its front end, if you have that sense of it, you know, being in a rocking chair. Once again, a correctly trained horse feels like it lifts you up, like you're on a surfboard rather, and you feel the wave come up and stabilize that surfboard and carry you forward. That's the feeling that you want. Not any kind of feeling like you're on a rocking horse. That's the wrong feeling. That's a horse that's hollow. Once again, it isn't hard to sit on a horse that's working correctly. It lifts and supports you, which is why we see so many people, you know, same thing with humans. It will ruin your back if you ride endlessly, especially in the sitting trot, on horses that are hollow. If you really try to get them to move, you know, you'll get this feeling of a pile driver through your back. If it feels like that, it's not right. A horse that's ready to be sat on will lift you in the trot and carry you forward and stabilize you, and actually very easy to sit the trot on. So I see a lot of people not only wearing their horses out, but wearing themselves out. You know, many people, you know, of my age and my generation are already having hip replacements and things like that. People I run into, or have stopped riding completely because they've just destroyed their bodies. So once again, bad riding will destroy you as well as it will destroy the horse. But once again, this is really good rhythm. I just love everything you're doing here today, and it's just right. You know, you're just keeping him forward and active the whole time. He's never slowing down or getting behind your leg, and yet you're not having to work very hard, and that's what I want to see. You're not having to kick away. The horse has a lovely swinging active stride. You know, most horses, I find that almost every horse I ever run into that's reluctant to move is reluctant to move for a reason. That is a physical reason. Either they're in pain from a bad saddle, from, you know, from years of that sort of abuse, or they're just going completely hollow and their feet are sore, this or that. So most horses are quite happy. It's natural for horses to move because that's what they do in nature. You know, they're animals of flight. So that's why they're so beautiful to train, because we can sort of play on that natural instinct and desire to move. So when you run into a horse that just doesn't want to move, you really want to have your vet check it over and be sure that there isn't something bothering it, which can be as little as a saddle. You can put a bad fitting saddle on a horse and totally destroy its desire to move by pinching its withers and shoulders, or having pressure points on the spine, or is not the gullet in the saddle is not wide enough, so it's sitting on top of the ligaments instead of on the muscles in the back. So all those things make a big difference. But you see, when a horse gets working correctly and is comfortable, like this one, it's there's not going around with his ears pinned back. It's just swinging and active and has a beautiful swinging stride all the way around. There's no sense of stopping and starting all the time. It's one continuous flow forward, and that's how training should be. Even if you were to stop and rein back, and the rein back should come quite far along. Horse should be very, very well over its back before you even think about starting the rein back, because it must have that sense of the horse coming into the contact from the bridle. That was a beautiful shoulder in right there. It could have been stretched a little deeper in it, but that was really good. Once again, he didn't lose the rhythm and just kept going and right on to the next thing and right back into the stretch. So while he came up a little bit and lost a little bit of rhythm in that shoulder in, you came right back to the stretch and got him right back to where he needed to be. So that was really good and exactly the approach that you want. Beautiful change of rhythm. I love how he's just swinging and active. And once again, go back and look at your previous videos and look how much more flexion this horse has in its hock. Once again, now I'm getting a little sense of the horse bouncing off the ground in the trot. There's a sense of thrust. That is, thrust is the degree to which the horse pushes off the ground with its hind legs to push itself up into the air. And once again, it can't do that correctly until the withers and back have formed correctly. But this is looking really, really good. Everything about this is an excellent workout today. And once again, another exemplary workout for people to look at home and see how you, just working on your own, have done such a beautiful job with developing this horse. And it's great that you're working with a chiropractor and vets and having them look at at how your horse is developing. So they're giving you that good feedback, and that's what you want. So if your vets and chiropractors are telling you, hey, what are you doing? All of a sudden, your horse is looking great. You're on the right track, and that's what you want to see. We use chiropractor all the time, but very often they come and say, well, there's nothing I can do for you. Your horses, there's nothing wrong with them. They're out. So that's the point of riding them correctly. You'll have to spend a lot less time with veterinarians and chiropractors, and if you work them correctly, they'll be coming like you experienced and saying, hey, this horse is looking amazing. What are you doing? Well, show your friends what you're doing, because this is how it should be done. And once again, once you realize that training, when it's done correctly, is a simple thing. I mean, anybody with the level of riding skills that you have, that's can walk, trot, and canter, and has good balance on a horse, and can ride without hanging on their horse's mouth, can train any horse. If you can do this, you can ride to Grand Prix. Getting a horse to connect through its back is the most difficult thing to do. But once you learn how to do it, it makes everything else easy. So when you see people battling and fighting with horses, trying to get them to do movements and, doing all this whipping and cranking that they do and roll cream horses and all these things, it's just so unnecessary and so undesirable as well, because obviously the horses are miserable when they're ridden that way. Once again, this is a really good canter, well over his back. So once again, this is a good enough canter that you can canter and it's going to have a good effect on the horse. Look how nice and round he is over his back right there. That's absolutely beautiful. And you're doing it just right. Just quiet seat. I'm not seeing a lot of kicking, just sending him forward into the contact with your reins and softening him beautifully and letting him stretch into the contact. That's all there is to it. And once again, as I said, once you can do this, get a horse working over its back consistently, you can develop your horses to Grand Prix. This is the hardest thing to learn in riding. The rest of it is simply learning to put your leg here or there, and learning to ask when the horse is capable of doing something. Once again, the reason so many people encounter so much difficulty in training is they're asking the horses to do things that are physically impossible. Just like if I ask you to go pick up a 500-pound weight. If I train you for 5 years, you can probably pick it up. But, if you can't and don't have the strength, it's simply not going to happen. That's what happens with horses. Beautiful stretch now. Look how deep and into that. And once again, if you go back and look at the difference between this video and your last one, this horse is tracking so much, he's covering so much more ground in less strides and, almost never losing his back end out behind him like he was in the previous videos. So this is absolutely wonderful. Just so much more of a sense of free swinging forward. That's what you want, and you never want to lose that. And once again, after the horse develops enough, once again, you wouldn't want to even think about collecting a horse. Remember what collection means, which is once the horse is over its back, it's the degree to which the horse lowers the 3 joints of the hind leg. There's no way you could do that with the horse that is still as undeveloped in the back as this whole horse is. So when they're ready to do that, as I think you'll see, that's why I'm doing some of my videos on collection of the horses that are ready to do it. So you people can see what the difference is and what the requirements are to get to that level. But when it's there, when you've developed your horses sufficiently, collection is not a difficult thing. It's nothing you have to fight a horse into doing when the back has been developed correctly to do it. It comes just as easily and natural as everything else. Again, just absolutely wonderful rhythm in this. Stretching so nice and deeply into the contact whenever you ask. And just such a beautiful sense. And even here, I'm beginning to see some lengthening of stride. That's real. That is, he's starting to really swing through rather than just run. So that's excellent. So once again, you want to start adding those transitions within the gait into what you're doing. So lengthening the strides as you did there is something you can add to what you're doing. Once again, as long as you can keep the horse over the back, you can begin to work those exercises. Now, if you try to lengthen the stride on a horse that's hollow, once again, unless the horse is one of these fabulous, fabulous movers that has so much natural lengthening in it that it just happens all by itself. But even those horses will be destroyed if you try to hold their heads up, and then push them through, instead of letting them swing through from a developed back. So once again, a really good canter here. This is all very useful, and I love about the length of time that you're adding in your canters is just about right. So now remember, you can go on up in your next video as something to add as well, as I can start seeing some leg yields and shoulder ins in the canter. So just like you do in the walk and trot, you can start bringing the horse up the center line and doing a leg yield from the center line to the outside. And once you can do that, then you can start doing your shoulder ins. Now once you can do those two things, that is, you can do the leg yield in the canter and you can do the shoulder in the canter, then you can begin to think about doing some counter canter. And that would be simply, just come across the diagonal, do one simple halfway through the short side there and back across the diagonal is how I like to start with my horses. Or a simple just shallow loop serpentine coming out from the corner and back on the same side is actually the best way to start. And once you can get those, that is, just out to the center line and back again on the same side, then you can start to think about going across the diagonal and going through the short side in the counter canter. But I think you're about ready to start with that with this horse once you can do the leg yields and the shoulder ins in the canter, which I'm sure you'll be able to do in no time at all. Once again, coming back to a beautiful canter here. That got a little hollow there. You can see how his head kind of came up and it kind of slowed down behind. So he's looking a little tired to me there. But once again, you got him right back into it. You got the neck back out ahead of you once again, and that's just what we want to see. And I like the periods of time that you've kept the canter to short. A few circles around, and then back. So once again, the next lesson that I see with you, let's add the leg yields and shoulder ins to the canter. And if you can go ahead and add the counter canter, like from the rail, it says the best way to start off is to start from the corner, come out towards center, and back on the same side. And then once you can do that, you can actually go across the diagonal and through the short side in the counter canter. So start adding that in your next exercise. It would be good to see. And I think he's ready for that now that I see how nicely he's working over his back. I wouldn't mind seeing in your next video a little bit of sitting trot work. It's about time to maybe start him a little bit for just a few strides at a time. So once again, that would be from your stretch. So get him into a full stretch in the trot. And then just sit for 3 strides at a time. Sit 3 and rise 3, or sit 5 and rise 5, or 3, however you like. Odd numbers always work out, so you come up on the same diagonal. And start to see if he can support your weight a little bit. And once again, if you feel like when you sit to the trot, it slows him way down instantly, that tells you he's not strong enough. So start with just a few strides at a time. 3 is the place to start. 3 strides, and then 5 strides, 7 strides. Then you can try to do half a circle or a full circle, but only as long as the horse, like everything else, can maintain the rhythm and can maintain the position over its back. I said, once again, once you understand how the back guides your training, it simplifies everything we do. And if you stick to that program as you have done, what happens is the horse just develops without you having to think about it all. Every day it gets better and better, as your horse has done. I mean, this horse is remarkably better than the last time I saw it. Just so much more swinging and active. There's a much less of a dent, so to speak, in the back behind the saddle there. That's starting to come up, though. It still has a ways to go. But with the work that you're doing here, you're going to see big changes. Now, once again, remember, it takes about a year of this work, whether you're starting with a 3-year-old or you're starting with a 20-year-old, to get the back up and flat, and get it where to get enough development that you can really start to do, more in terms of the sitting trot, and you begin to see the horse after it's come through behind, and that withers have really pulled up to the shoulders, and horse develops a more uphill stance on its own. It's so funny because people go out and they look for horses, that have this great conformation. But, every horse can look, if it's hollow in the back, you can totally change that and how it looks. It will look completely different. We've had so many horses, like the horse you see Perhaps when we started her, had no withers whatsoever, and the saddle just ran up on her neck. And if you see her today, you'll see that she has quite a nice, not overly prominent, but a nice withers to hang a saddle on, a place to put it in the back to sit on. So that just took a bit of time. And just always know that it takes that time. Once again, it takes about a year to establish the top line and strong enough that you can really begin to do more sitting trot. That is, that you can go through a whole, maybe say, training level, first level test in a sitting trot position without losing the rhythm. And that's about what I expect it to take. And that's what it takes with most of them. If you try to short circuit that by doing too much too soon, you end up with nothing. That was a nice downwards transition. This is a good way to practice these. I like how you're not jamming the horse up. We must get out of this idea that we want horses to do sliding stops. I see this in dressage all the time. People jamming their horses down on the horse's back, wanting that stop to be instant. And that's not the feeling that we want. We don't want to feel like a horse puts on the brake. A correct stop, we feel the horse continue the stride coming up underneath us to step underneath the body, rather than jamming our back down into him like somebody trying to do a Western sliding stop. And once again, every time you do that, those sliding stops, it's just like your car. If you slam on the brakes over and over again, pretty soon you're not going to have any tires. And that's what happens to horses' legs, who people constantly, stop them up short and rein them back, thinking they're getting them on their hindquarters. Once again, all that does is slow the horse down and gives people a false impression of balance, because the horse is now going so much slower, usually hanging on their hands at the same time. But that will never give you the kind of swinging and active work that you're getting here. It's looking so good. Once again, it's always interesting to look at the horses around you, and look at what their backs look like. We've gotten used to horses looking sway-backed, and I find this very alarming. I go to horse shows and I see all these upper-level dressage horses, and to me they look like 20-year-old nags. They're so sway-back because their backs are so bad from being set to the trot too much and hollow and forced into these, forced into trying to do these collected, what they think is collection, which is just snapping the legs up. Once again, collection is the degree to which the horse lowers the three joints of the hind leg and then thrusts off the ground to lift you, not how high the horse lifts its legs, which is totally different. Horse can be completely hollow, as I said, like a saddlebred, and lift its legs up around its knees, lift its knees up around its head, but that doesn't mean the horse is collected. And once again, really good rhythm here. This has been an excellent workout. Couldn't be happier with where you've gone with this horse, and this whole workout has been so logical, so forward, that is engaging forward into the body, swinging and active. Nothing's gone on too long. You've come right back to the stretch in all cases and gotten the horse really to get back over his back every time that you've lost it a little bit by trying something like in your shoulder ins there a few times. But that's absolutely developing beautifully, and you keep doing what you're doing, and you never browbeat the horse about what it's doing. You just went back, re-stretched them, and do it again. So that's the whole key. Don't beat, repeat, and don't repeat ad nauseum. Repeat a few times. Once again, it's like chess. A good player, a good dressage rider is like a chess player who's thinking many moves and months ahead of time of what's the horse going to turn into if I do this, not what can I make it look like right now. Right now, all you can do is get the horse over its back, and we must start there, and then in time we get everything else. So once again, really great workout today. So again, another good canter here, though he's starting to now to look a little tired to me. So I think this might be one canter a bit too many. He's starting to look a little tired to me, and it's kind of slowing down a little bit here. So I'd like to see one more good stretch and leave it at that. And that's what we want to do, get that sense of a good rider. Equestrian tact is the degree to which you feel the horse and you're listening to it. When it starts getting tired, you want to do a little more, come back to a final stretch and be done for the day. Just like you're doing here. Absolutely wonderful. Absolutely wonderful. So keep up the good work. This is Will Faerber from Art to Ride. I look forward to seeing your next submission. Start to add in the leg yields and shoulder ins in the canter and some counter canter and a little bit of sitting trot in the stretch, just a few strides at a time on a circle. Absolutely wonderful. Great work. Keep it up. I look forward to seeing your next submission, and I hope you're influencing some of your friends there where you are, that they're seeing the wonderful work that you're doing with your horses. And that's my whole goal, is to get everybody around the world doing this so horses can live a happier, longer, healthy life. See you next time at Art to Ride. This is Will Faerber.